This episode is brought to you by hazy. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm taking you to the micro world, and I'm going to talk about parts per million in microns. And this is especially important in pool service, where you're going to hear these terms thrown around a lot out in the industry. And it's a good idea to know what each of these represent in the micro world. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy coaching program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. I'll start off with the microns because it's a little bit easier to understand versus parts per million, which I'll get to later. And it takes a little bit of unpacking and why the term is used in the industry. Micron is simply a measurement of how small a particle is. And this is really important when you're talking about filtration for the pool, and also when we talk about vacuum systems and robotic pool cleaners. So let me just explain what a micron is. It's 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So 1 micron is equal to 0.001 millimeters. To give you some context, the human hair is about 70 microns, and fine beach sand is about 90 microns. A grain of salt is about 100 microns. So we use microns for filtration because it's a pretty small particle, and you get an idea of the filtration capacity of different filter types. For instance, a D filter will filter down to 1 to 3 microns. A sand filter will filter down to about 25 to 30 microns. And a cartridge filter is anywhere from 10 to 20 microns. I've heard sand filters up to 40 microns as well when they describe it. And D filters, I've heard 2 to 5 microns as well. Just note that the D filter is the best filtration system out there. Because of the diatomaceous earth that coats the grids, it traps everything basically from going back into the pool. Cartridge filter is the second best, of course, and sand filter is the third best filtration type out there. These are the primary filtration types that you're going to find out in the pool industry. There really isn't much of anything. There's some hybrid systems like a quad D filter that uses a cartridge type D grid. And then you have different sand filter media as well. But sand is typically what's used, and that's what it's referred to as. So basically the D filter again is the best. And you can't really see anything really above 30 microns. 35 microns is the largest particle that a human eye can see without magnification. So keep that in mind, that even using a sand filter, you can't see anything that the sand filter doesn't pick up in the pool. Same with the cartridge filter, and especially with a D filter. So that can't be seen. Pollen is a little bit bigger, and then of course the human hair is 70 microns, and then table salt at 100 microns. So a micron is a very, very small measurement. And when you talk about vacuum system bags, this is where this comes into play. Also, robotic pool cleaner filtration systems, the micron definitely comes into play. I'll start with the vacuum system bags to make it easy. If you have a 60 micron vacuum system bag versus a 200 micron vacuum system bag, which one picks up the smaller amount of particles? And the answer is the 60 micron bag, because that will filter down to 60 microns. This means that it'll trap everything in the bag and only let out whatever is not 60 microns or smaller in diameter or particle. So it'll capture, of course, since human hair is 70 microns, it'll capture human hair without it passing through the bag. Of course, it doesn't really pass through the bag because of the way the bag is designed, but that just gives you a visualization. It'll pick up salt because salt's 100 micron and it filters down to 60 microns. So it'll pick up salt in the bag without letting it back into the pool. But it won't pick up pollen because pollen is a smaller micron particle than 60 microns. So it'll pass right through the debris bag back into the pool. Nor it will pick up algae dust because algae dust is smaller in particle size. It's about, I think, 10 microns or so. So the algae dust will pass right back through the bag into the pool. So you kind of get an idea that even at a 60 micron, dirt, small particles like pollen, and then algae dust will pass right through the bag. And that's why when you're vacuuming a vacuum assisting bag in a pool, and maybe there's DE on the bottom or there's some pollen or dead algae, it'll go right through the bag and cloud at the pool. It's not really made to pick up anything less than the 60 microns, and that's why a 200 micron bag won't pick up anything below that, and everything will pretty much pass through the 200 micron bag, and it's something that's used mainly for leaf debris, larger debris, and not necessarily to pick up these smaller particles. When you're talking about robotic pool cleaners, if you compare, for instance, the Polaris robotic pool cleaner debris canister with the Dolphin filter canister, there is quite a difference in microns there. I believe the standard, although they don't list it, the standard debris canister for the Polaris cleaner is roughly about 100 microns, maybe 120 or so. And then they have a fine, ultra fine canister, which is about 70 microns, but I think it's a little bit better than that. I would say it's more like 50 microns, but they rate it at 70 microns. Whereas the Dolphin cleaners, like for instance the Dolphin Liberty, they have a fine filter, which is basically a filter debris canister with a cartridge filter material on it, and this will filter down to about 20 microns. So that will pick up, of course, almost everything in the pool. I find that it picks up the algae dust, the pollen, even though it says 20 microns, it does pick up the finer particles as well. As it cakes onto the cartridge material, it'll actually stay on there and not go back into the pool. So if you're looking at robotic pool cleaners and you want to filter down to, say, 20 microns, the Dolphin cleaners do have that capacity with the fine filter, whereas the Polaris cleaners will filter down to, in my opinion, about 50 microns, which is something you can't really see anyway with the human eye. So the filtration is pretty close to each other, with the Dolphin being finer. If you look at cleaners like iPair, they claim to filter down to 3 microns, which is possible with their filter canister. And it's one of those things where it's all relative to, the fact that you can't see those particles anyway. And I would say that the Polaris cleaner with the ultrafine, the Dolphin with the filter canister, and the Apier cleaners all filter down to a good fine micron. And there's not a huge difference between those three, although the Dolphin cleaner, I would say, would be the finer micron robotic pool cleaner versus the other robotic pool cleaners, barring other manufacturers like iPair that will filter down to even a finer particle. You also see the micron rating in some robotic pool cleaners as a kind of like a so that's 1/1,000,000th of a meter, and that's kind of the scientific marking. It's not quite a typical U, but it's kind of looks like a and that's just 1 micron, or that's the micron rating. So if it says 70 that's 70 microns, just so you know. So just to recap, the smaller the micron, the better the filtration. So a 60 micron bag will filter debris down to 60 microns. So anything smaller than that will pass through the bag, and anything 60 microns and above will be trapped in the bag. So a lot of dirt, a lot of silt, a lot of the gunk in the pool is going to be captured by a 60 micron vacuum system bag, but other stuff will pass through that's not down to that micron level. That's a finer micron level, I should say. If you're wondering about the pressure side cleaners with the bag on top, the Polaris 280, the filtration of that is not quite as good. I think the Polaris Quattro filters down to 100 microns, but those bags on top, I would say, are probably about 200 microns or so. They do make an ultrafine bag that's really good. I think that's about 100 microns. So the return side cleaners won't pick up dirt, and that's why you see a lot of dirt in the pool on the step areas and corners of the pool, because they're not designed for dirt. They're primarily designed for leaf debris, and that's why a suction cleaner is better for pools with a lot of dirt, because then you'll use the suction cleaner and it'll pick up all the dirt and it'll go into whichever filtration system you have attached to your pool and filter that out. And speaking again about the vacuum system bags and the Microns there, one nice thing is the new bottom feeder cartridge filter assembly. It's the cartridge filter on top, the bottom feeder, a shrimp cleaner, which will filter down to 10 to 20 microns, because it's basically just a cartridge filter on top of that vacuum system. And this is the only vacuum system that's actually designed now to collect dirt in the pool down to 10 to 20 microns. So if you're looking for a vacuum system that will capture debris down to 10 to 20 microns, which is dirt, pollen, algae dust, diatomaceous earth in the pool, then the bottom feeder or shrimp with the cartridge filter assembly will do that. Again, the bags won't capture anything below their micron rating. It'll pass right through the bag back out into the pool. And this is why this cartridge filter assembly is really a game changer in the vacuum system industry. Let me switch over now to parts per million. And this, of course, is a very small measurement because it is a parts per million. To give you an idea, 2 parts per million of chlorine seems like a lot of chlorine in a pool, but it's only 2 ounces of dry and about 10 ounces of liquid chlorine in 15,000 gallons of water. Again, think about this for a minute. 2 parts per million of chlorine in a 15,000 gallon pool is about 10 ounces of liquid chlorine or 2 ounces of cal hypo or dichlor in the pool. It's a very small amount in a large body of water. And this is where a lot of people kind of get confused when you say that the pool has 5 parts per million of chlorine. You only have about 50 ounces of chlorine in that pool in a 15,000 gallon body of water. And it's not a lot of chemical in that water itself. And when people say that they have a reaction to chlorine, it's probably more or less a reaction to low pH in the pool, because there is not much of a chemical in that much water. And here's 1 part per million compared to other measurements. You get an idea of how small 1 part per million is. It's 1 minute in 2 years. It's 1 penny in 10,000 pennies. And it's 1 inch in 16 miles. So a part per million is a very, very small measurement. You can look at it another way here. 1 part per million is 1 part chemical per 1 million parts water. Again, that's why it's called parts per million, because it's 1 in 1 million parts per water. So basically, 3 parts per million of chlorine means 3 milligrams per liter. 100 parts per million of calcium hardness is 100 milligrams per liter. So 1 gallon of water weighs 8.34 pounds. And this is going to come into the equation in a minute here, because we use 10,000 gallons of water as the standard measurement in pool chemistry. And you may wonder, well, why do we use 10,000 gallons of water, not 15, why not 20? And why do we even have a standard? Well, the 8.34 pounds of water makes it possible to actually calculate standard chemical dosing. And this is what they put on the packaging of the bags and trichlor tablets, because you need some kind of standard for this to work because of the 8.34 pounds in 1 gallon. So a 10,000 gallon pool has 83,400 pounds of water. That's a pretty heavy pool. That's a lot of water. That's a lot of weight, by the way, in a pool if you ever think about it. So 10,000 gallons of water, again, has 83,400 pounds of water in it. So 1 parts per million in 10,000 gallons equals 0.0834 pounds or 1.33 ounces of pure chemical. Again, 0.834 pounds or 1.33 ounces of pure chemical. So this makes dosing easy. So you can really simplify the calculations, because the 10,000 gallons really helps with breaking down the weight of the 1 gallon. So basing everything on 10,000 gallons of water eliminates doing a lot of complicated math, which we don't want to do in the pool industry. We just want everything simple. For instance, if you wanted to add sodium bicarbonate to raise the alkalinity in the pool, baking soda, we know that 1.5 pounds raises at 10 parts per million and 10,000 gallons of water based on the calculations of the parts per million and the 10,000 gallons, the breaking up the gallon of water into that. So it's really easy to calculate that. So 7.5 pounds raises total alkalinity by 50 parts per million in 10,000 gallons of water. If you have a 20,000 gallon pool, you just double the dosage. And of course, you can use online calculators to calculate dosing. It does all the math for you. It'll separate this for you based on a 10,000 gallons formula. So I like the poolcalculator.com. If you have a 14,000 gallon pool, it'll actually break it down for you based on that size of water, and you won't have to do any math. Again, there's no reason to do real math out there doing pool chemistry. With all these calculating apps that are available, you just put the amount of gallons of water and then what you want to raise or lower in the pool, to alkalinity, pH, chlorine, and it'll actually calculate everything for you based on the 10,000 gallons of water formula. Again, standardizing this also makes it easy. For instance, cyanuric acid or stabilizer, if you wanted to raise it by 10 parts per million in 10,000 gallons of water, you would need 13 ounces, or 4 pounds of it will raise it by 50 parts per million. And again, this is all because we've standardized it to 10,000 gallons of water to make calculating things very easy in the industry. So 1 parts per million is 0.0001% or 0.00001. So 10,000 parts per million is only 1%. It's a really small measurement. And again, if you're going to have 2 parts per million of chlorine in a 15,000 gallon pool, there's only 10 fluid ounces of liquid chlorine in the entire body of water. So I hope after listening to this podcast, you know the micron sizes, kind of you get an idea that, a grain of salt is 100 microns, and you have filtration depending on the filter down to at least 30 microns with a sand filter, down to 5 microns with a D filter. And then you'll know more about parts per million. It's just a measurement based on 10,000 gallons of water to standardize dosing in the industry. And you can find all kinds of charts online with dosing charts with 10,000 gallons of water. Since it's standardized, you can actually add every chemical you can think of in the pool industry off of that 10,000 gallon chart using a app like the poolcalculator.com based on the size of your pool or the pools on your pool route. And you can get really good dosing, very accurate dosing measurements based on that. And it's really great to have something standardized in the industry. And it's always been like that since I've been in the industry. So it's something that probably won't change, and it's something that makes really life easy out there. And you don't have to have a scientific calculator to calculate, 8.34 gallons and all the other things. If you really unpack the math, it gets really complicated and it's really interesting. But just note that the micron and part per million are a very small particle measurement that we use in the pool industry. Looking for other podcasts, you can find those by going to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com, clicking on the podcast icon on the banner. There'll be over 1,800 podcasts there for you. And if you're interested in my coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.